today's video is going to be all about my vegetable garden that I had this summer of 2020. This was the first time I had ever had my own vegetable garden and really any like garden at all. So I did like a whole kind of mini series here on my YouTube channel showing you guys how I started this garden from seeds and how we built the raised beds and then how we actually planted everything and transplanted all the seedlings. And this is kind of my final recap video sharing with you the progress of that garden all throughout the summer from the time that, you know, those seedlings were pretty much planted, which you guys saw in that video, up until like the death of the garden. I really wanted to document this whole process. I really enjoyed having this vegetable garden. I feel like it was a success in a lot of ways, but then also some failures on my part in some other ways, which you guys will see. And I'm gonna share with you guys all of the video footage that I took this summer, kind of documenting the garden throughout the months. And then at the end of this video, I'm gonna share with you just some of my thoughts, hindsight, looking back, things I will do differently next time, just things that I've learned, just kind of maybe some lessons, some things that I learned that I can pass on to you. So if this is something that you are planning to try next summer or whenever, maybe you can glean a little bit of that knowledge from me instead of having to learn it for yourself. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I want to give you guys a little update on the progress of our garden through the summer. So everything got planted around, it was like a little bit after Mother's Day, so in May. It has been about 3 to 4 weeks since we have planted everything outside in the boxes, and I did a whole video on how we built them, or the raised beds I should say, how we built them and how I planted everything and transplanted everything outside, so you can go check that out if you haven't seen it. They have already grown exponentially since I planted them as little seedlings, and it's so exciting. I just feel like my seedlings started to look, if you saw the video, they started to look a little sad towards the end, and I was starting to get really nervous that this was just going to be a complete fail and I was going to transplant them and they were just going to all die. That was like my fear. And I am so pleasantly surprised that that has not happened at all. Everything is totally taking off. Everything is growing like crazy. Even my cucumbers, which were not looking, they were looking like they were just not gonna make it whatsoever, and they're starting to grow. So I'm gonna show you guys the first glimpse at the progress of my vegetable garden, which is now in about beginning of June, mid-June. I don't even know what today's date is, but let's go check it out. Okay friends, so here is the current garden setup. So we've got our 4 raised beds, and I'm gonna walk you through what we've got going on. So this this raised bed is all tomato plants. When we planted these, if you saw the last video, I mean, they were maybe like this tall and not nearly this wide. They have been growing like crazy. They have totally taken off, and I'm so excited. I do need to get some kind of like support structures for them soon, because they just look like they're starting to need it. You can see like this one over here is kind of, yeah, he needs a little help. But yeah, so this box, I keep saying box, this bed is looking amazing. Over here we've got another row of tomato plants. I wanted to do a lot of tomatoes because I was just most excited about those. So we've got a ton of tomato plants happening. And then here are all of our pepper plants. So they have also grown a lot. These have been, out of everything that I have planted from seed, these have definitely been the slowest to grow. They germinated and sprouted way later than everything else, and they were just still teeny little seedlings when I planted them out here. But they are still growing, even though they're little plants. They're growing a ton. I don't know if that's normal, maybe it is. But those are looking really good. Tons of new growth, you know, coming through on each of those. And then over here, we have broccoli. These have grown like crazy. This is like the size of my hand. These were also teeny little sprouts. The broccoli ones were so small. They were also looking really sad when I planted them. They were very spotted with what looked to be some kind of disease, and I was afraid these were not gonna do well, but they have completely taken off and they are looking so big. Now these were planted late. I learned after I planted them that really these should have been planted outside a lot earlier, but I just did not have beds ready, and I was just like, whatever, we'll see what happens. So I don't know what's gonna happen with the broccoli, if we're actually gonna like get a harvest or not, we'll find out. But those are looking amazing. Next we have onions here. These are so wild, you guys. I'm like so fascinated by all of this because I've never had a vegetable garden. These were also teeny little seedlings, and now you can see they are so thick. It almost looks like aloe. It's crazy, and they're getting so tall. You can see off of the top of the bed. I mean, they are just so tall, and they're just growing like weeds, which is pretty cool. And speaking of weeds, the weeding of these have not been bad at all. Some little tiny weeds start to pop up, but every day I just come out here and just pluck them out, and it hasn't been a big deal at all. Okay, and then this last bed, this is our smaller one. We've got lettuce all growing here. They are looking so beautiful and just really, I mean, like thick, sturdy, beautiful heads of lettuce. And I'm so excited about those. I don't really know what much else to say on that. And then down here we have our cucumbers. So I did stick these in like right away, which honestly was really unnecessary, but they did have, as you can see, they grow, I'm sure there's a name for these, I don't know. They grow these little like strings almost that they wrap around to like grow up. So I put these in right away because they did have some of those, and they were so sad looking that I wanted to try and see if I could almost like hoist them up onto these from day one. They didn't take to them, but they are starting to now. Like you can see, they're starting to wrap around all by themselves, but they are growing beautifully. These were so sad looking. If you saw the video, you saw they pretty much were all looking like all the leaves were starting to dry up like this. They just were not looking good. But they did have teeny little cucumbers on them, which is why I decided to plant them, because I thought they had hope. All of those little cucumbers did die off, but we do have some more new growth coming in. You can see the little flowers starting to bloom. We've got little flowers like all over the place. So those are actually totally working out, which I'm super excited. I was not thinking those were gonna make it, but they totally have. So overall, things are looking really good. Good morning, guys. So I am back with another garden progress update. I am so excited to show you guys the garden. It is almost July. We're in like the last few days of June. So it's been like a couple weeks or so since I filmed that last update. And the garden is totally taking off, you guys. I am just so pleased because I feel like this whole time it was just thrown together so last minute, where I was like, this could easily like just not even happen. Like I could go through all this. I was just so doubting myself, and I'm not even really sure why. But anyway, I'm gonna show you the garden. Everything is just growing like crazy, and we do actually have like our first produce that's actually growing, and definitely can start harvesting some stuff. So let me show you. Okay guys, so here are my raised beds. I'm gonna start over here with our luscious giant tomato plants. So we have 12 total. There's 8 in here, and then 4 in the first half of this one, which you guys already know. They are huge. As you can see, each of them has a tomato cage now. Definitely was a little late to the game getting those in. They probably should have gone in way earlier. So they did start growing kind of funky because they were like drooping over and then growing up. But I did my best to kind of support them and straighten them out, so I'm hoping that helps. I also went through and pruned them a ton. Another thing I probably should have done way sooner than I actually did, because they were completely out of control. I still feel like maybe they're out of control, but I was like afraid to take off too much. And there's like certain things that you should cut off and not cut off. Anyway, so here is all of our tomato plants. Now, there are tons of little flower buds growing all over, like each one. Like you can see there's some down there. They all have lots of these little buds that are going to turn into tomatoes. But on this guy over here, he is our first one to produce an actual tomato. Look at this little guy in here, bright green, little buddy. I'm so excited. So we've got our first tomato in the works, and lots of flower buds happening on all of the others. So then over here, these are all of our peppers in this row, and they are just now also starting to get some flower buds, which are all going to turn into peppers. They all have these buds starting, but they're just now, like you can see this one's kind of a start, and then this one's actually starting to bloom. So they all either have starts, they all have starts, but I don't know if that's probably not the name, but they are starting to actually bloom in like the last couple of days. So that's really exciting. And then over here, this is our broccoli, which is super out of control. So the broccoli will actually grow like in here. We don't really have that happening yet. It's still just these massive leaves. And we actually lost one. This is one down here. I mean, it is completely blocked from the sun. I did space them out. I think it's like a foot is what you're supposed to. It was like about a foot. Clearly that wasn't enough because this little guy got down here and got completely hidden from the sun. Hasn't really grown much, and also had a ton of leaves that were like super diseased. I cut all of those off. And I've been cutting off leaves underneath, like if they start to show signs of disease, if they're just laying on the soil. Other than that, maybe I should be pruning these more. I honestly have not even looked into it. Probably should do that. So then over here we have onions. They are just getting so crazy tall, which is kind of cool, but I obviously have no idea what's happening underneath, and I won't for a long time. And then over here we have all of our lettuce. So pretty sure in the last update, I can't remember because I do share this on Instagram too, a deer or something had gotten to most of our lettuce and ate a lot of it. But they have completely grown back. Nothing has come back to eat it, which is honestly so shocking to me because it's like free food. We don't have a fence. I know we should, but so far we've been really lucky, and I'm just kind of living on the edge with that. Maybe we'll eventually do something. Okay, cucumbers. You guys, so excited about the cucumbers. I could cry. Do you remember when I planted these seedlings? They were so sad looking. I was like, I almost didn't even plant them, but I was like, well, you know, we'll give it a shot, but they're not looking good. I don't even know if they're gonna grow. Well, they're growing all right. So they've completely started to climb up each of the tomato cages. Actually, like you can see, they're latching on, they're climbing up, they're getting huge. But the coolest thing, you guys, is look, we have cucumbers, and there's a bunch of big ones in here. You can see them. There's two big ones right there. So I actually really need to start picking these. There's another big one. Another big one. There's a ton that are growing in here. Like, look at all those cucumbers. We have like cucumbers coming out of our ears, and there's so many little tiny ones. Like if you just look, I mean, they're literally everywhere. So we are gonna be just swimming in cucumbers, and I cannot wait. I'm so excited, and I really just didn't think these were even gonna make it. So I'm really glad, and I just want to point out how like cool these tendril things are, that they just like know to start latching on and like spinning around things. And these two plants, I don't know if you can see, here's one, here's the other. Look, they're totally holding hands from one tendril from this plant, one tendril from that plant. And I just think that is the coolest thing. Hey guys, so it is the end of July, and I'm back with another garden update. Things are going still pretty well. I'll give you a rundown on what's happening with each of our different plants. But overall, things are happening. I would say the garden is like a little bit out of control. In a good way, but also a bad way. I've been trying to stay on top of it and, you know, prune as much as I can, but it's really just not been happening as nearly as much as it probably should. But we have produce that's growing. We have things that are growing, and that's the most important part. So I'd call it a win. All right, guys, here are my tomato plants. So as you can see, they are, I mean, they're out of control. I was really on top of pruning them. I mean, they were still kind of out of control, but way better than this. And then things just kind of got away from me. So all of these are pretty crooked now. It is very windy where we live, and we've also had some really crazy thunderstorms. So I've just kind of given up trying to re-straighten them out because they just don't want to be. But you know, I guess they're still doing their job. So we have tons, I mean tons of tomatoes, a bunch of green tomatoes. Every single plant is filled with them. I mean, there are just so many, but most of them are still green. Some of them are starting to get like little hints of red. I don't know if you can see that, but we do pretty much just have a bunch of green tomatoes. I haven't harvested any yet because, like I said, they're all still green, but there are tons and tons of them all over. Now we do over here have our first red tomato. I think this might have actually been our very first tomato that like bloomed or whatever, started to grow, because it was on this specific plant, I remember. So that's our first tomato. I'm not gonna pick it quite yet, but I am probably gonna pick it very soon. So that is super exciting. That'll be our very first tomato. But otherwise, we've just, I mean, they're everywhere, you guys. That one over there looks totally crazy. But yeah, tons of tomatoes. They're just not ripe yet. So we are just waiting on that. But overall, they're growing like crazy. And then on this side, we've got our peppers. So those are coming in nicely too. I actually need to get out here and start to harvest some of these. I haven't picked any yet. Tons and tons of peppers all throughout these plants. See, there's like a little baby ones right there. But there are tons of those. So that's super exciting. I'm gonna have peppers galore. So I need to get out here and pick some of those. And then over here we have broccoli. Look at this. So this is basically a full head of broccoli, which needs to be harvested, and pretty much every single one. That one's a little bit smaller. This one's pretty sizable. They're all fairly big. I still don't know, I need to Google it, what I'm supposed to do here, if I'm just supposed to rip off the head and a new one grows. That's kind of my guess, but I don't know that for sure. So that's why I haven't harvested any yet, but this one down here is definitely really big. So I should probably figure that out today. Okay, then these are our onions. They are getting huge, as you can see. So with onions, you basically are just, like you can see, that is definitely an onion growing in there. You're just kind of waiting for these big stalks to kind of completely flop over, and apparently that's when they're ready to harvest. And then you rip them out of the ground and then lay them down on like a screen for ventilation in the shade, not in the sun, in the shade for like a week for them to really dry up and get that like dry skin on the outside. So I'm still kind of waiting. Some of them, as you can see, are starting to fall, but apparently you're supposed to wait for them to completely fall over. So that's what I'm waiting for, but they are almost ready. So that's super exciting. All right, now let's talk about my lettuce. This was, I don't even want to call it a fail because this is like not uncommon, but all of my lettuce has gone to seed. So I'll explain what that means. So as you can see, there's like these big stalks coming up the center. You don't want that. You just want a big round luscious ball of lettuce. So lettuce is a cold weather crop. So once it gets really hot, this happens very quickly. They go to seed, they sprout up these big shoots. And what happens is the actual lettuce leaves themselves, while they're still edible, they're very tough and they can be really bitter, and most people just don't really want to eat them. So there's a couple things you can do. You can completely rip them out. That's not what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna cut them down like one at a time, and I'm just gonna feed this to our chickens because they'll eat it. We won't eat it, but they'll eat it. And I'm just gonna cut them down one by one, and I'm gonna give them a chance to grow back. But basically, this was way too much lettuce, because it was at one time perfectly beautiful giant balls of lettuce I could have harvested. But we would have just never eaten all of that lettuce, so I didn't. And then this happened really quickly. I was not expecting it to go to seed this fast. So that kind of caught me by surprise, but I'm still learning here. Anyway, okay, so now moving on to our cucumber plants, which are still doing well. I see that there's one that kind of grew out here, and look, we have some cucumbers down there. So my cucumber plants have been the star of the show, I would say for sure, since the beginning of this garden. So I've been getting these massive, just beautiful cucumbers. This really needs to be picked off. I'm gonna wait till tomorrow morning though, because apparently they stay crunchier if you harvest them early in the morning. I just learned that. I read that the other day. So I'm gonna wait. But I do have some. I've got those two big ones down here. And there are a couple others, I think, coming along in the plants. I do feel like production has slowed down. Here's another big one right here of the cucumbers, which is honestly fine because I've been giving them away like crazy and we still have so many. I really need to make some pickles, but I think we're up to, now not including the ones that are ready to be picked, like about 40 cucumbers so far off of just these. Well, technically it's 6 plants, but they kind of morphed into 3 big plants. So that's super exciting. And if you guys remember, I almost didn't plant these in the beginning because they were looking so sad, but I just decided to try anyway, and they totally took off. They did great. So you can see there's still a lot of new growth. Like here's a little tiny cucumber. There's some other ones down here. So still growing, still chugging along. I think because it's gotten hotter, they seem to have slowed down because they really like hydration, and that's like the easiest way to kill them is not watering them enough. So I think maybe we just had a huge heat wave, so I'm thinking maybe that's why production has slowed down a bit, because we were getting like 14 a week, and now there's probably only a handful that are ready to be picked now. I think there might be a couple more. Here's a little one growing here. But yeah, so overall, doing really well. We've had tons of cucumbers, got a lot of peppers I can pick, onions are getting there, some broccoli can be harvested, and then we're about to be swimming in tomatoes once these all turn red. Hey you guys, so I am back for the final garden update. I feel like this segment of the video should be titled Death of a Garden, because that's pretty much what's happening here. Now, it's also mid-September, so it's normal for the garden to be dying off at this point. But also kind of coupled with that is, by the time you're seeing this video, it's already been announced on my channel and on Instagram and everything, but we are expecting another baby. So I have actually been in my I'm in my 2nd trimester now, but I was in my 1st trimester through the entire summer. June, July, August was my 1st trimester. So I have not been on top of this garden, you guys. I've barely even touched it, to be completely honest. So that's another reason why it's just kind of been a flop towards the end of the summer, but I'm honestly happy. I feel like I learned so much. We got a ton of cucumbers and tomatoes. I have a ton of onions we're still using, so it was a total success. So I'm excited to do it again next year, just knowing all the things that I know now. But I'm gonna show you guys what we're working with here. It's a little sad. Okay, so here's our first set of, well, our first, raised bed, and these are all tomato plants. So they're actually still fairly alive. I mean, they're still flowering, like we could still get tomatoes off of these. Some of them are kind of dying, and then as you can see, here's the other one. They're all over the place, meaning these things. We actually had a tornado come through our town a little bit ago, which was absolutely insane. I've never experienced a tornado in my life here on the East Coast. So there was literally like, I tried to fix them. They were just a lost cause. So everything is just growing on top of each other, and it's a total mess, you can see. So those are all tomatoes. So I know that with tomato plants, at least with these kinds, you can like cut off the top so it stops growing up, and then it basically puts all its energy into making more tomatoes. I know that that's a tip. Probably should have already done that at this point. Maybe this is the time to do it. I honestly don't know, because totally new to this, but I do know that that's like a possibility. So then over here, like there's still tomatoes growing, but they just don't look very good. These are pepper plants that are also completely taken over by the tomato plants. Like I said, it's a mess in here, but there actually are still some. They're just not looking so great, but that's what we've got going. A lot of growth, just not a whole lot of fruit. Ow. Sorry, I just stepped on something. Anyway, this box right here, if you remember, it used to be broccoli and onions. So the broccoli totally died off a long time ago, and it was getting gross, so I ripped it out. And then the onions I actually harvested. I planted 12, and we got a total of 11, I think, and 2 of them were just like little babies. And I just let them sit out outside in the shade, like sitting on a screen for air circulation for about a week, so they could get a nice dry outside. And then I still have some in my house that I've been using to cook. So then over here, this was lettuce, completely dead. Some of it was already ripped out, and I fed to the chickens like once I had gone to seed. And then over here, this is the really sad part, because we haven't even been out here to collect these massive cucumbers, which is a waste. It makes me sad, but this is just real life. I'm showing you guys. There's also weeds coming through, and this grew completely into the grass that we've just been cutting around. So there we have it. All of the cucumber plants are completely dead, but they pumped out so many cucumbers, you guys. We got like over 50. I was keeping count for a while there. And then obviously if we had picked these poor left behind cucumbers, some of them are maybe salvageable for the chickens, but we would have had even more. So this is the final garden update, because we're honestly not gonna be doing a whole lot with those. We're gonna be ripping them out soon. Yeah, and then obviously this is all gonna go completely dead. But yeah, there you go. There's the final look, end of the garden. It was a good season, it was a good run. I learned a lot, and I'm already excited for next year. Okay, you guys, so that is my garden pretty much from start to finish. It is crazy how big everything got just from those tiny little seedlings that I originally planted. It was a very cool experience. And again, success in a lot of ways, failure in some others. So I wanted to share with you guys my takeaways from this garden. My number one, or my first takeaway, these aren't any order necessarily. My first takeaway is next year, for my next summer garden, I want to start much earlier. This year, it was a total scramble. I decided to do this pretty much at the last second, and I feel like I was just treading water trying to stay on top of the timeline of creating this garden, and it was honestly really stressful. So this year I plan to start a lot earlier as far as planning and ordering seeds and making sure I have all of the supplies well before it is actually time to start putting them to use. My second thing I want to focus on with my next garden is focusing more on variety and maybe pulling back on some of the just quantity of certain things that I made. So as you guys saw, I had so many tomato plants, and I had these high hopes of preserving a ton of tomatoes and making a ton of tomato sauce and canning it. And then this summer, just, you know, I was super sick, and I just, you know, I was doing the bare minimum. So that was not happening. It was also just really hard to get my hands on mason jars. I feel like they're sold out everywhere, or just the supply is not what it used to be. And so none of that happened. So I ended up just having so many tomatoes, more tomatoes that we could ever eat fresh. And it was just, you know, that didn't work out super well. And then even with the cucumbers, more cucumbers than we ever could have eaten fresh. And again, I wasn't on top of canning. I didn't have the supplies. I never did any of it. So that was one thing that I definitely next year, I just want to have a little bit, now that I've done it once, I can have a little bit more foresight into how much we're actually going to eat. And this year I definitely do want to try my hand at some preserving and canning. I'm not going to have these massive goals, but I would like to at least do some to at least experience it. Next year, one of my biggest things is I want to be more on top of the harvest. So like I said, this summer I was really just super sick, and the garden got very neglected. I was very on top of it in the beginning, but as the weeks went by, that just wasn't happening, which is fine. I'm okay with that. It was just a season that I was in. But next year I have no intentions. I mean, I will have like a tiny baby, so have no intentions of being pregnant or sick, hopefully. So I really just want the garden to be kind of a daily, not even task, but something that we do. We go out every morning, we see what we've got, we bring in the produce that's ready to be picked, and it just becomes part of our daily routine, and not so much this chore that has to get done that is now out of control because I've totally put it off. I really just want it to be more ingrained into our daily life so that the garden is healthier and we end up not losing out on all of this stuff that we worked really hard to grow. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but my fourth thing is I do want to preserve some of the things that we grow. I'm already thinking about maybe growing some other things outside of just like, you know, tomatoes, which are easy to preserve or make sauce and can it, or cucumbers, you know, you can make into pickles and things like that. I already have a couple other things, so I'm like, maybe I will try some other things as well that I know that we buy all throughout the year. So we'll see. Maybe I'll do another series on my garden next year, but at the bare minimum, I do want to at least attempt some canning and some preserving next year, just to try my hand at it, just to start learning the skill. I don't have these big giant goals to, you know, put up a ton of food or anything, but I just want to start that process of learning how to do it. And then from, you know, years to come, I can continue to build on that skill. My fifth and final takeaway is next year, I not only want to learn more about really just keeping the garden in check as far as like pruning goes, but I actually want to put that into practice. Again, the garden just kind of got away from me this summer. It was very neglected. Things were very overgrown, and we still grew a ton of vegetables, but I feel like there's definitely some more work that can be done there. And again, I'm not shooting for perfection by any means, but I think I would like to just learn a little bit more about that again, so I can at least start to put that into practice, and then I can continue to build on that skill for the years to come. But next year I have a huge goal to hopefully not just let it get wildly out of control, and at least have some measures to keep the garden in check, so that we can enjoy it even more. Okay guys, so that is it for this video. If you've been following along on this garden series, I hope that you enjoyed kind of getting this overview and this recap and learning from my mistakes. So I hope that you will all try your hand at some kind of gardening next summer, whether it's just having some pots of tomatoes out on your apartment porch or something like that. Just do whatever you can with where you're at. That is like such a big lesson that I continually learn from people who, you know, are like full-blown homesteaders, which I am not a homesteader, but you know, I would love to incorporate more of that into our lifestyle. So do whatever you can wherever you're at, even if it's just one plant. It will give you experience and skills, and it's actually really fun. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope it inspired you in some way, or maybe you learned something new. But thank you so much for watching it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.